Okay, so we've decided that cash is not trash, at least not all cash is trash. And we've also decided that being fully 120% invested in the market may quite not be the most optimal situation or scenario or portfolio allocation. Okay, now today we're going to deal with how much cash is enough, how much cash is too much. Because yes, you can actually have too much cash sitting in your account somewhere. That is plausible. But if you don't know how much you need to have, then it's just hypothetical. You don't even know if it's too much, if it's too little. But today we're gonna put numbers to paper. So you better get your pen on paper, because what are you waiting for? Let's jump right into it. But before we do that, remember what we talked about. If cash isn't allocated, then it's just laziness dressed up as safety. You wanna make sure that that's not you, because you watch this channel and you are smarter than that. Okay. Before we go forward, my name is Desire. I'm a Harvard-trained ex-Wall Street professional helping real people take control of their money. Okay, what actually matters in you putting money aside, cash aside, and not putting it in the market? There are two main things. I know that the rule of thumb that a lot of people throw around is 3 to 6 months income. You want to make sure that you have that. Great. But two things. The first one is your income volatility. Is your job stable? I mean, stable, i.e. do you make the decisions, or do you rely on somebody else's decision? It may not be performance-based. How stable is your job? How stable is your inflow? How stable is your income? That's the number one thing. The second thing is, what obligations do you have monthly? They're fixed. You can't really move them around. It's not something you can easily shift or easily pivot if you even wanted to, i.e. you have a mortgage. You have dependents, you have kids, you have parents, you have people that are relying on you and they have no other means otherwise. You have car note, you have debt, you have certain things like student loans, you have certain things that you absolutely have to service monthly, and those things you can't really get forgiveness for. And even if you did, not for a very long time, those are your fixed monthly obligations. And those are the two numbers we're going to look at today. Let's say, how much do you pay in rent every month? Put that number down. How much is your utilities every month? Put that number down. How much more do you spend every month to keep body and soul together, i.e. to stay alive? How much are you spending on groceries and eating? If you like eating out, maybe you're going to have to pick up the stove and some pots, but how much is that bare minimum number? I'm not talking Fogo de Chao and everything else that you love to do. That's great, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about survival. So we've decided that that number is $6,000. Fantastic. And I know for you, it could be much more than that because you are you and you're getting it. For you, it could also be much lower than that. Maybe it's 3,000, 4,000. Maybe on the higher end, it's knocking on 20,000, 15K. Just extrapolate and make this math work for you. But we've decided that a good flat line is 6K, somewhere blended average in the middle. Okay, then we want to talk about how stable is your income. If you paid your dues, made your way through, on the high end, you got it. You've paid your dues. You've been working with that company for X number of years. They love you. If the tree shakes, you've still had some time to put yourself together. You won't be the first to be cut. Okay, fantastic. Or are you commission-based? If you don't sell, you don't eat. Or is it that you own the business? It's for you. No one's going to kick you out. But maybe you don't trust the ebbs and flows, maybe traction, maybe external factors can affect your business, but you're the one making decisions. And really, I would never be at zero because I've been in this business. It's a generational business. It's a business that's been founded since 1922. Fantastic. Or, I have some customers. It's good. There's still room for growth, but we're okay. We could do okay. Even in a downturn, we would still be fine. Or I'm just done now, I have a couple customers here, but, things are still a bit rocky. Where do you lie on that spectrum? Now, are you a two-income household and are you guys all dependent on the two income? Or is it just like, we can live on one person's income, we just have two because, we're young, we're agile, we're working, we're hustling. What is your situation? I want you to pause a bit and put those numbers down. The numbers changes dramatically depending on your situation, but be intentional, be instant about what we're going through. Put the numbers that is appropriate for you down because those numbers can change very dramatically. Now we jump into the numbers. Let's take scenario one. Scenario one, you are stable. You work for a Fortune 500 company. You are good. You are not the bottom of the barrel. If they had to make layoffs, maybe it will touch you, maybe not in the first round. But even if it did touch you, you will get a very cush package You will get nice severance for a few months that gives you runway. Fantastic. And your monthly non-negotiables are $6,000. Great. Okay, we doff our hats to you. We love to see you. We love you. And we know that you've done well. Great. But what that looks like for you is maybe you want to do 4 to 6 months of emergency funds. That would usually be sufficient because maybe you wouldn't be blindsided. And if you were, you would still get severance that adds to the cushion that you already have. So we're looking at somewhere between $24,000 to $36,000. You have that saved up. You could even round that up to $40K because why not? You could. That's who you are. You can do that. Fantastic. We think do that. Now, if you want to also create some optionality for yourself, you can think 50% to maybe 70 to 80% of what you had for your survival kit. You want to have that for optionality. So maybe we throw in another $20,000 there for optionality. Fantastic. Now you're looking at $60,000. Please, my dear, do not have $150,000 and don't do that in idle cash. That's just idle capital sitting there doing nothing for you, and you are paying the cost of carry. You're just carrying that money and it's depleting right before your very eyes. Even if you wanted something like 6 to 8 months, that's still not $150K. So you want to make sure that you're not drifting too much into the territory that you're just really carrying dead cash, because except you have, near planned purchases that you are planning for, it doesn't quite make sense for you to hold on to that money because, you can. Now you want to keep that money in, some type of long-term investment. So we're talking $30K for survival. That works. If you want to round it up to $40K, that's fine. And then you're talking another $20K for optionality. If a deal came through, I dabble in stocks, I dabble in this. I want to make sure that I have room for it. That's great. No one's gonna hurt you for that. No one's gonna hurt you for that. That's great. But everything else after that should be long-term invested. You are protected enough. You shouldn't be keeping money on the sidelines just because you're not decisive enough, okay? That's structure, not access. Very quickly, let's jump into scenario 2. Now, let's talk scenario 2. Now, you are commissions-based. If you don't make a sale, you don't eat. Maybe you own a business and, there are ebbs and flows. Sometimes you're blowing it out of the water. You're making all this sales. You're making all this money. But sometimes it's a bit quiet. And it works out. It works out. The blended average quite works out. So it's not that you are suffering or anything. But because of that volatility, it does increase your risk, okay? And so for you, maybe you want to do something around 8 to 12 months, okay, of core expenses. We're going to say your expenses are also about $6,000 a month. So we want to do somewhere like 8 to 12 months of core expenses for survival. So you're thinking 48,000 to 72,000, and that's like where your sweet spot is. Maybe you even want to round that up to $80,000. Okay, that's fine. That's still reasonable. No one's going to be mad at you for that. I can understand that. So that number is 80K. That's fantastic. You want to bake in optionality into that. And that's an additional 20 to even 30K. So you're now sitting at a beautiful, well-rounded number of 110K. Everything outside of that should be invested long-term. It should be in the market. You shouldn't be sitting on it because then you're just paying to hold your own cash. That cash is dying every day when you could be putting it to work. The idea of making sure that you strategically allocate your money is, one, to make sure that you can survive and you're safe, but also it's structure such that you're not putting excess where it doesn't need to be. Everything needs to be well intended and well implemented. Now, let's talk about the third scenario. So this is a bit tricky. Think about this as you are a dual income household. You work in tech and, you are also, your lifestyle is also correlated. You spend north of $10,000 monthly, maybe 15, maybe 20, whatever that looks like for you. You have a higher correlation risk. And what does that mean? Your income, your lifestyle, your investment are facing the same direction. So your lifestyle is highly correlated, i.e. you're on the higher side. Your income is good, but it's also just inflow. If anything were to happen, market tanks, something happens, your job could potentially be gone, your inflow could potentially be gone, your lifestyle is already adjusted on the higher side, and things may not look good. And for someone like this, you want to think about it thoroughly and say, all right, if there was a layoff in my sector, how much severance would I get? Even with all of that, assuming that, you're not at the bottom of the barrel, it wouldn't be you first, but it could affect you, but you would get very good severance and all that. That's great. That's some stability, but still highly correlated in the direction that maybe may not be too safe. So you want to think about at least 6 months of emergency funds. 6 months. And so with 6 months, you're thinking somewhere around $60,000. But maybe, you want to build that a little bit more. Maybe that's, not just 60, maybe you want to do 70, something that gives you some type of solace, but at least 6 months, you want to put that away. Then you're thinking about optionality. You want to do optionality, depends on what you like to dabble in. If you're the kind of person that would say, hey, I like to do some startups here and there. I like to do some real estate. I like to do this. I like to do that. I like to take, advantage of the market. If that opportunity presents itself, maybe you want to do 50% of that. Like we talked about in scenario 1, maybe you want to do 50% of that. You're thinking 30K. And at some point you're wrapping up nicely around $90,000 to $100,000, depending on if you had used $60,000 in the beginning and you're baking in another $30,000 for optionality. That is knocking on $100,000. Maybe you don't need that much. Maybe, you're a lot more stable than that. But at least for this scenario, you want to at least have that. What you also want to make sure is any dollar over that is long-term invested, is working harder for you, because you have baked in survival, you have baked in optionality. You shouldn't be paying to carry your cash any longer. What making sure that you have survival and optionality cash does for you is that it smoothens your volatility. It's not supposed to not do anything at all. Your cash is not supposed to be idle. It's not supposed to be lazy. It's not supposed to be comfortable, but it's supposed to be properly, intentionally, deliberately allocated. And that's what we've discussed. It's design. You want to ask yourself, am I holding this cash because it's strategic and I've thought about it and I have all these things that I want to do and it's near term, or am I holding this cash because of anxiety? If it's anxiety, we want to think about that differently. We've asked ourselves the question, if I were to lose my job, if I were to be incapable of working, what would I do? How could I survive? We've baked that in. Does my dollar have this single defined purpose? We've also baked that in. And so when you bring all of this into focal length, you can then decide to allocate every single dollar where it belongs, and you know why it's there. Whenever anybody asks you, I have this amount here because of this. I have this amount here because of this. This amount is allocated in the market because before I would have to pull out that long-term investment, it will be a while because I've already protected myself, to the extent that's reasonable. Now, let me clarify something. When I say put that in cash, I'm not saying that put $100,000, $110,000, $70,000 in cash, in liquid cash. No. You want to at least put the very first 1 to 3 months in some type of high yield savings account. Your savings account doesn't need to be your checking. It's not your Bank of America. It's not your JP Morgan. It is not your Citibank. No. Let your checking accounts do what they do. Let it be checking. Let it do that. However, for your emergency funds, the first 1 to 3 months, put it somewhere that's still very easily, approachable. You can touch it. You can do whatever with it. The first 3 months is just sitting there earning bare interest rate, but it's at least at your fingertips. It is not in your checking account, like we said. However, anything outside of that, you want to find something that is a vehicle that exposes you to some growth, slow, non-aggressive, still easily touchable and reachable, like the money market, maybe an ETF basket or something like that you like, that exposes you to the market, but it exposes you to some growth, but it's not aggressive. And it doesn't penalize you. That is not money that you're trying to optimize for the best valuable return. No, that's money that you want to expose to some growth, but ideally it should still be doing something for you. It should still be growing, but you know why it's there. So it's something that's very, very mildly exposed to the market. That number still sort of stays there, but it's exposed to some type of growth. So you want to think in 3 stages. You're thinking immediate liquidity. This is your high yield savings account. I need to touch it. Like if you're in the UK, you're thinking maybe your ISAs. You need to touch this money. If anything happens, I need to be able to access this money. And then you want to also think about some measured, slow, some level of exposure growth, gentle growth, but still there. It's getting exposure. It would do what it would do. Maybe move at the speed of a snail. That's fine. And then you want to think about your longer term actual portfolio allocation, your longer term investment. Those are the 3 categories of how to utilize your cash and how much cash should stay in each bucket. And all of that, the first 2 would be how much cash you should have and not a dollar over that. The third category is what you invest in the market. Design what you want in terms of survival. Design what you want in terms of optionality. We've talked about 3 different categories. Rewind this video, watch it over and over again. Figure out what works for you, but you want to make sure at least you have a structure. You have a structure that you can default to, and you should adjust this. If your income goes from 6K to 8K, adjust the numbers. If it goes from 6K to 4K, adjust the numbers. Your money is a living, breathing being like you. So always make sure that you tense your numbers, that you give your numbers some TLC, so that you always are able to talk about your numbers in a reasonable way. You're able to think about your numbers in a reasonable way. You're not waking up with palpitations because your money is dying or because you're overexposed in the market. But I'm curious, how do you handle your cash today? How much cash is too much for you, and how do you think about it? And if you love content like this, well, welcome. Where have you been? We've been waiting on you. Brag about it by subscribing to this channel. We would love to have you. And until next time, I will see you guys in a little bit in the next video.